Good morning, everybody. It is 8 o'clock Central Time U.S., and welcome to the Energy Realities Podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. We've got a special edition of the Energy Realities Podcast, and let me introduce our wonderful team today. First around the corner is Irina Slav. Irina Slav is a fantastic energy writer out of Bulgaria. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you. It's summer proper, it's hot, but we're fine. Still alive and not roasted, I mean.
Well, and we're still cooking with gas then, right?
Oh yeah, we're definitely still cooking with gas.
All right. And then we have David Blackman. I mean, not just a David Blackman, but the David Blackman. How are you this morning, Mr. Blackman?
I'm just fabulous. Absolutely wonderful. It's a beautiful day in Texas. It's hot as hell and bright skies, no rain in the forecast. I'm running up my water bill.
That I like. When you sit back, and I love all of your work that you're doing over on the Energy Absurdities Substack, your X account, as well as I saw your Daily Caller and your Forbes this past week. Well done. You've been busy.
Not much to talk about these days.
Do what now?
Not much to write about these days.
Holy smoke, Batman. Just when you thought energy absurdity left the White House, it is still, we got more than we can handle of talking. And then we have the Dr. Tammy Nemeth. She is absolutely having a great time in Canada, somewhere in an undisclosed location in Canada. How are you today, Tammy?
I'm doing great, Stu. Thanks so much. I'm on holiday, but you know, Energy Realities is so important. Gotta come.
Well, this is a huge topic today. And as we go through this topic, everybody kind of woke up to some very loud banging in Iran as we had some dipsy-doovy diving going on around the political landscape. And to kind of set this discussion up a little bit, if anybody was not aware, but we did have an attack on the Operation Midnight Hammer took effect, and this is from David Blackman had put this out on. This is from the Department of Defense. President Trump was warned by the Iranians to not attack the nuclear sites from the U.S. bases in Iran or use assets in Iran. So President Trump, Iraq, excuse me, and Iraq and President Trump responded and said, no problem. So he sent B-2 bombers from the United States. They flew 36 hours. And he also sent Tomahawks out of the seas from submarines and avoided that discussion. And so we've had quite a stir of events. The Iranian parliament has approved to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. However, they're waiting for their Security Council to approve that. Now, they have said over 15 times in the past since 1980 to say that in the past that they would go ahead and shut it down, but they have not shut it down in the past. So we've had some very high increases in oil prices coming back around, and we're currently at 73.57. down a little bit on WTI and 76.78 on Brent. And as we take a look at the Strait of Hormuz, what does this mean if it was actually shut down? Well, the numbers are staggering, about 20 to 30%, whatever the number is. I have to get an exact number, but it's a percentage of 20% of the oil in the world, of the global market, and 20% of the LNG market also goes through that strait. That is a significant chunk of oil and LNG from the UAE and all of the other Gulf states going through there. So, David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a big chunk. I think it's close to 30% of global oil production, daily oil production, flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Here's some percentages: 88% for the Saudis, 100% of Qatar, Kuwait, and Iraq. 60% UAE oil flows through there. Oh, and 100% of Iran's crude, or 90% actually, not quite 100%, flows through the Strait of Hormuz to get onto the global market every day. It's a big deal. So several points about this. I doubt Iran has the capability to shut down the Strait of Hormuz today. We have an armada of U.S. naval assets now in that region right now, and they would blow any Iranian naval ships out of the water immediately. China also has a naval presence there, 3 or 4 destroyers. They're not going to let the strait shut down because something like, 85% of the oil China imports on a daily basis has to flow through the Strait of Hormuz. They have zero interest in allowing their Iranian clients to shut it down. So I think it's an empty threat. But if there is some big move, or if they start lobbing missiles, what they could do is start lobbing missiles at oil tankers from other countries. And, that would cause some upset in global markets. But right now, overnight, I was anticipating a fairly significant spike in oil prices, maybe $10 a barrel, when trading opened on the Asian markets yesterday, which is about 5 o'clock, I think, Central Time in Texas. The opening price was only about $5 above where it had been at close of trading Friday, and it immediately went back down. And this morning, we're 50 cents below the levels at the end of the day Friday, as the markets are just kind of waiting to see what Iran tries to do next. As we record this episode, Israel has launched more attacks into Iran at other strategic sites related to the Iranian military, but they're not attacking Iran's oil infrastructure. So as long as the straits remain open, this is my view, as long as the straits remain open, as long as Israel and the United States do not go after Iran's refining and shipping capabilities, the impact on oil prices is going to be pretty muted. And, traders, the difference out 25 years ago, we'd have oil over $100 right now. No question about it. Today, there's so much real-time information, so much sophisticated, automated, AI-driven analysis of what's happening, that traders are not nearly as prone to panic as they were in the past, even 15 years ago when we saw it spike to $147 in 2008. And so I just think that has the impact of muting these market responses for these kinds of impacts in the Middle East, these kinds of upsets going on. And so unless there's some major expansion, I'm not really expecting any big price impacts here. But that's just my view.
Cool. Irina, what are you thinking?
I think it's really interesting that oil is not higher, but what David said is true. And there's also the fact that we have algorithms thinking instead of oil traders. And I think because they've outsourced their thinking, that's why they're not panicking. On the contrary, I just saw the oil price chart, and oil is down from this morning. And that's because the Iranians have not yet closed the Strait of Hormuz. And I've been noticing for years now that unless the supposed supply disruption happens immediately right now, traders start selling because, oh, it's not going to happen. But you never know, because while I agree with David, it will be really hard to actually block the Strait of Hormuz. They have to try. This time, it has to be more than an idle threat, because this time they're being bombed by Israel and by the US. They have to save face, if nothing else, the Iranian government. They have to show that they're being serious. It won't be good for their standing with Iranians if they don't try to block it. How successful they would be is another matter, but just the attempt to block the strait would lead to a response from the US military, which will also cause a disruption in oil flows. It will be probably much shorter than if it's blockaded, but I really don't know what's going to happen. But I'm pretty sure there will be some sort of disruption, and maybe oil prices will, scare oil traders by rising faster, or maybe not. I don't know. The oil market is insane. No, seriously, it's
Oh, it
not
is. You're
normal.
right.
But it's funny. It's entertaining.
One of the
The
things
oil market, not.
Yeah.
One of the things that is most interesting about the Strait and Iran has two oil export, one right at the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, and then the other one is their Karg Island. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, which is normal for an Okie Texie kind of guy like me. But when you look at that island, that's 95% of their oil exports are off of that island. And then you take a look at whether or not there is spoofing going on right now, GPS spoofing. Last week we had 3 tankers on fire because of the sanctions on the tankers are causing problems with them turning off their sanctions, their GPS, and everything else. And then there are terrorist type activities on the shores. You don't see any tankers near the Iranian side. And as we take a look here, Tammy, what are your initial thoughts on this?
I agree with what everyone said so far, especially with respect to how trading happens. I know that there's a lot of sort of emotion in trading, and sometimes it can be based a lot on this sort of waterfall effect, I guess, where one starts panicking and then there's the knock-on effect, and a lot of people start panicking on the trading. But maybe there's something else going on. Maybe it is the algorithms that are doing more of the trading now that is tempering that sort of thing, like what David and Irina said. I agree with Brian Zinchuk here. It was like he said, "I'm shocked oil prices aren't up $20 this morning." And Brett Baker had a great comment where he said, "Sympathy for those of us trying to negotiate an oil and gas lease would be appreciated." But if you're negotiating a lease now in North America or something, it'd be like, yay, we can have energy security and back things up. What I find interesting is, like, Irina had a great Substack this morning where she talked about these tankers doing U-turns, and I think.
Whoops.
We've lost Tammy.
Irina, were they Iranian tankers that were doing the U-turns?
I didn't see that mentioned, just that tankers were turning or stalling in the area.
Oh, I think I'm frozen.
Let me see. No, but we can hear you. No, my point was that even without an actual blockade, tankers are, and tanker owners are being careful, which is already a disruption because some of these tankers were empty. They were going there to load. And I wanted to make a point about Iranian exports. A few days ago, Reuters and Bloomberg, I think Javier Blas, were reporting that Iran is sending more tankers out, maybe in anticipation of something. And there were all these reports over the past few months that China is doing so badly on oil demand that it is putting oil in storage. Really? Maybe it was preparing for things. Or maybe it wasn't, but now it has more oil in storage. So I think that while it's a very valid point that China would not like it if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down for however long, China is not exactly unprepared. That might matter. I don't know.
And when the bombing started a little while ago, there are roughly 1,400 tankers in the dark fleet. Of those 1,400 tankers, there's many of them used for refined or diesel and other kinds of products. Russia has about 670 of those tankers. But what Iran was doing was filling those tankers to
What's
offload.
wrong with internet connection?
Am I here?
Yeah, I can see you. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. And so,
you there, Stu?
Yeah, I'm just sitting there trying to think. Okay, so on your story, on your story, Irina, it is very good. And when we take a look at the China has got their storage, their demand is down, but Iran has 90% of their federal budget is oil exports. And so I think that President Trump and everyone is smart enough not to bomb the Iranian oil export, because whoever does that is going to be responsible for trying to rebuild a complete disaster of a regime change. If there's any hope for a regime change in Iran, I hope they leave the oil exports alone, and the capability for 90% of the federal budget is tied to oil. So I really don't want that hit at all. I think that's a last ditch thing. And I think the Iranian folks are absolutely wanting a regime change from everything that I can see.
No, they don't. No, they don't. I actually read a really wonderful comment on X. Yes, they don't like their government. They haven't liked it for decades. It's repressive, it's cruel, and all that. But this guy was saying, an Iranian, that they have seen what happens when the US bombs you to bring democracy. They've seen Libya, they've seen Afghanistan, they've seen Iraq. They don't want that. So they are stuck between their own repressive government. I'm not using the word regime because we either call everyone a regime or we call them governments. We can talk about the EU regime, the German regime. They're being oppressive as well. Probably not as brutal, as Iran's for the time being. Anyway, language aside. So the Iranians are actually rallying behind their repressive government because it's their government. And this guy was saying it's better to have a government, however repressive and cruel it is, than have no government and end up like Libya. Can you really blame them? Because I can't.
No, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. And what happens? I mean, and Brian Zinchuk has an interesting comment here.
Brian's very, very right.
Yes, he's a smart guy. Iran's only major play left is to close the strait. It's art of war. Strike your enemy where it is weakest, and that's the strait, and that's true. But the other side of that is we know now that Israel can decapitate the Iranian regime whenever it wants to, right? I mean, we've seen they've already decapitated all of the military leadership in Iran. And I mean, I think the Ayatollahs understand that they are still breathing only by the grace of Benjamin Netanyahu, and there's not a lot of grace there. So I think further escalation by Iran has to be tempered by that knowledge. And I just think we're going to see a lot of saber rattling from Iran about closing the strait. I doubt they're going to actually try to do it. They might lob a few missiles into the Gulf, but I just don't think they're going to try to shut it down. That's just me. That's just my opinion here from what we've
I
seen
think
so far.
you're right when you say like they need to save face, and there has to be something there for them to be able to go back and say, well, we push back against the great Satan and, all that kind of thing. But I think one of the elephant in the room is China, because
Yeah.
China has ships around the Straits of Hormuz as well. And are they going to side with Iran and say to America, we're protecting those the Iranian tankers going through because they're destined for us? I don't know. I think that there's the potential there for escalation. Is China ready to take on the United States at this point? Could it escalate into something wider? Maybe. But this is one of the interesting things when this stuff is happening right now. It's lots of speculation and trying to figure out
Yeah.
where things could go. I think what's fascinating is that the NATO meetings start tomorrow.
Yeah.
And this isn't North Atlantic, but they they have to figure out, are they going to support what the United States is doing? Is there going to be some declaration against Israel and against what this action has represented? Are they going to be unified? I'm not sure. I know that whatever the UK says, Canada will probably mimic because, excuse me, the Prime Minister's office in Canada tweeted the exact same statement that Britain did. And I'm like, what do they have the same guys on
Really?
tweeting the same? Yeah, it was pretty funny. So it's kind of like they're just copying each other, which is always fascinating. What I'm worried about is that this will be used by the net zero people in the UK to double down even further on wind and solar, saying once
Yes.
again, we'll be
Yes.
held hostage by these international prices if we don't invest in more wind and solar. So that's definitely a possibility. So it interesting times.
I like this. I believe this is from Travis Lynn.
Travis Lynn, yeah.
Do the 1,400 tankers that are turning off their GPS transponders locators as a response to sanctions outnumber the OPEC Plus and BRICS that can still be located in Eastern and Western hemispheres? I'm not sure what you're thinking there, but on the OPEC, as Irina put out, and I was going to point out on her What's Up article this morning on her Substack, is that the OPEC Plus increase in production did not happen. And so you sit back and kind of go, she had some great points in there, Irina, on that. Is there spare capacity when I don't think that they can?
Yeah, and the spare capacity is in the Persian Gulf, which is really inconvenient if fight breaks out in the Gulf.
The United States could put
but
a lot more oil on the market, but it would take about a year.
Canada
That's
could
not
have, but we
fast
don't have
enough,
pipeline.
What'd you say, Tammy? I'm sorry.
I said Canada would be able to help, but we don't have a pipeline.
Oops. You know, one of the biggest travesties to the Canadian oil fields is the death of the Keystone Pipeline. And the United States needs to quit taking advantage of forcing and keeping Canada's oil on a different level, because it's basically we're robbing Canada's oil by putting it on rail. Did I just say that out loud? I'm sorry. It needs to be in a pipeline and have equal pricing applied to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's the discount pricing into the Midwest, which is, you know, terrible for Canadian oil producers, but it's, pretty much the only place it can go. I mean, it can go west now with the Trans Mountain twinning of the pipeline there, and some of it is going out. But I think there were two big travesties. One was the cancellation of the Energy East pipeline, which would have sent oil to the East Coast, would have been able to export to Europe, would have been completed by now. And then there was, of course, the Keystone XL, which Obama killed and then Biden killed and everything. Really, the environmentalists killed that one and their lobbyists in Washington. So, yeah, I mean, it's a pity that there were different mechanisms there in order to reduce the pressure from these kinds of geopolitical developments and allows for more energy security. But now with the SPR drained, I don't know how long it will take to repair that. So the United States doesn't have quite the same amount of storage that China has, and China's been building up their storage for a very long time. So I think that China could weather this better than, say, Europe or other jurisdictions. But China's got, they're buying oil from all different kinds of places. Perhaps one of the reasons why they were supporting Iran so much was they were probably getting it at a significant discount because Iran couldn't
Right.
sell it to anybody else. So,
You
yeah.
bring up a very great point, Tammy, and the energy security for the United States has been compromised by Governor Gavin Newsom out of California. He has decimated what California used to be an energy independent
Yeah.
thing. David had a great podcast last week on that. And when you sit back and take a look, they import 70% of their oil. And part of that, believe it or not, the molecules are coming from Russia. And I find it odd that they're running their refineries out of business. And you look at the refineries that are being increased in China, you have to wonder if contracts aren't in place for the California to buy finished products from China. Makes a lot of energy security questions for me, but that's a different topic. But it is around the energy security because California, if the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, 70% of the oil going to California comes from there. Anyway, sorry, I get tickled.
Which is roughly the same percentage that's going to China, right?
Yes.
75%, I think, of China's imports come through the Strait of Hormuz. So here's a roundtable question. Let's go around the table. I'm sorry, Stu, I don't want to
Please do
take over your moderation, but I think it's an interesting question as we sit here today. Where do we all think, let's say WTI, which is right at 74 today, right now. Where do we think it'll be a week from today when we reconvene?
Oh, I really
that's
don't
tricky.
like doing this.
Let's just see.
I have
Let's
no
think about
idea.
this.
It will be
That's a-
either higher or lower than it is today, because if nothing happens within a week, prices will tank. And I think OPEC might be thinking about this. If nothing happens, oil prices will fall, and they will fall hard. When somebody hypes up an oil price rally because of some supply disruption or other,
Right.
And you see a jump in prices, and then when the disruption doesn't happen, they tank harder than they have gone up. which is once again because of this algorithmic trading, and it's not humans doing the decisions, but humans listening to machines doing their decisions, which I think is perfectly safe and reasonable and nothing to worry about until an actual disruption occurs.
Right.
So I don't know where prices will be, but I don't know. We'll
Just
see.
take a guess, a wild guess, just a number. Grab a number out there.
WTI.
WTI. 74 right now.
WTI, sorry. You said 74 today?
74. It's up 20 cents.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'll say 77.
77. Okay, Tammy?
Just to be funny.
I hate making these predictions. I'm like Irina. It's
While
like, I have
while
no
you're
idea.
thinking,
I know.
Brian-
I did too. but I did it.
Brian Zinchuk says it'll
He
be
says 95.
Yeah.
Well,
So
like
if
you,
not-
Brian, you'll be told.
Yeah, so if nothing happens, I think it'll hover around the same that it is now, maybe drop a little. If tankers start being hit, if they actually try to close it, then I think it'll spike fairly quickly. I would probably put it at about like the 85.
85. Okay, we've got 77, 85, and 95. Stu?
Oh, is someone writing this down?
Well, I'll take notes later.
We will have the transcript provided out on our Substacks,
That's true.
Irina.
That's
So
true.
just be a little
Oh, yeah.
thought there. And here is Itulan. Itulan has around 78, and I
78.
almost agree with him right on the money. For I think there's going to be less swinging in the WTI, and let me throw this squirrel into this can. And that is, I think that it is going to be. Robert's also got a good one as well.
75. Okay.
I think that we are going to see less impact on WTI because of the disruption is not going to impact WTI nearly as much. I think it's going to be a higher swing if there is anything going on. And I think that swing, that $5 difference may widen a bunch because there's less. Where do you sell your light sweet, and who are the buyers for it? You have to look at all of those different matrices around there. And so I see that there's about 75, 78 for WTI is where it's going to kind of hover
Pick
around.
a number. Pick a number. One number.
77. And I think
77.
that
Okay.
Brent is going to be a lot higher.
Okay. I've got 68.
Okay. I like it.
And I think that's optimistic. I think it's probably going to be lower than that, but I'll go with 68.
Okay.
For the factors Irina stated a few minutes ago. Because when the drop comes, it's going to drop hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was my contribution to the, to the discussion.
We've had a lot of fun this morning.
That's a great map, by the way, with those three major choke points there. That first one that you had,
The first
that
one,
we've been looking
this one.
at.
Yes.
Yeah. So, the Middle
Yeah.
East has so many of the world's global choke points, which is
It
significant.
does, yeah.
There
But would
are
you
two.
agree the Strait of Hormuz is the most important one? Because if the oil can't get through there, it doesn't enter the Suez Canal. It doesn't enter the Red Sea if it can't get through the Strait, right? So really, I think the market's going to respond more to the Strait of Hormuz than the other two.
Yeah, especially with the fact that it cuts off Qatar and Emirates.
Right.
For the LNG.
Yeah.
So
There's
it's
the
not
LNG,
just the
yeah.
oil that's affected with this,
That
it's
is
also
correct.
the LNG. And there's some indication that if they decided to hit an LNG tanker, they're more vulnerable than an oil tanker.
Yep.
Well, they're more
how
likely
you-
to, catch fire.
There are
Explode.
regimes change over energy. And when you take a look at why did Syria fall or have a regime change, it's because they did not allow pipelines. Look at this map. You have Iran, Iraq, and Syria and Turkey. And Turkey, over the last 2 decades, has been trying to become the natural gas conduit through that land bridge to the Europe. And it has absolutely been regime changing because of the trading in rubles versus the US dollar. And I've been spending hours on talking about all of this. And this is absolutely critical, that this is only one piece of the energy puzzle when you're looking at regimes and the US dollar, and whether or not it's trade in rubles or in the yuan or anything else. It is, we are seeing, somebody had a question on the BRICS and everything else. I think you're going to see more and more importance on what countries trade in what dollars or in their own currencies very soon. We are going to see a lot of that changing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Brian mentioned this in the comments. The first story there, he wrote this great piece on Saskatchewan is going to rebuild its coal fleet, the coal power fleet, despite the federal regulations that say they have to be at a shutdown by 2030, 2035 or whatever. 2030. So Saskatchewan made this huge announcement. Brian had the minister responsible for it on his podcast on Friday, I think it was, Brian. It was great. And basically, they're saying they're going to refurbish their existing coal fleet and reopen some of the ones that they had shut down. They're going to install carbon capture that they're going to use for enhanced oil recovery, even though it reduces the amount of power sent to the grid because they have to use the power to, capture it and so on. But one of the big things is to use the enhanced oil recovery to increase the oil production in Saskatchewan. The premier has come out and said that he wants to double Saskatchewan's oil production by 2035 or whatever it is. Now, what's interesting about coal in Saskatchewan, people are like, why would you want to do that? It's because the province is it's a state utility. So the province actually controls the production of the power through Sask Power, and the province owns the coal. So they don't have to pay world prices for anything. It's basically they're paying themselves to use the coal for their own power generation. So it actually keeps the prices lower. But I mean, some people could argue that the reasonably priced coal and coal power in Saskatchewan is subsidizing the wind and solar they've been forced to install because of these stupid net zero regulations. And so, consumers are basically subsidizing this wind and solar. So the goal is to transition to nuclear by 2050. So the coal is going to be this bridge to nuclear by 2050. And I mean, Saskatchewan does have the best uranium. Maybe the SMRs will be helpful. But the minister responsible said that they're looking at an all of the above strategy rather than just shutting everything that works down. Because like in Saskatchewan, when it's really cold in the winter, the wind turbines don't work and there's no sun and it's minus 40. Who can keep their house warm, So they're going to do this.
Cool. Sounds amazingly sensible. It's refreshing and a little bit shocking that somebody somewhere is thinking rationally for a change.
Especially in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, especially in Canada. Could be because it gets really cold, and we know how dangerous this kind of cold can be, and that you need reliable, really reliable energy to survive this cold.
Exactly. It's not like Vancouver, where it goes down to -5 and everybody's panicking and freaking out. It's minus 40. You step outside for any kind of extended period of time without proper stuff, you die. So it's like, do you want your citizens to be dying in order to meet the net zero proclamations from the federal government, I mean, they have a responsibility to the citizens, so yeah, good for
Well,
them.
don't
That's
don't
great.
ask them that question directly. You may get an answer you don't like
Sure. I mean, they're
from
expanding
some
the
of them.
assisted suicide in
Right.
Canada. So I think it's like the number 4 cause of death in the country is through assisted suicide. It's
Yeah.
really quite tragic. Anyway, then the second story is ArcelorMittal drops their plans for green steel in Germany due to high energy costs. This is a Reuters article. And this is the most hilarious quote from the German government. They said the most important takeaway from them saying we're not going to do green steel, we're not taking the subsidy. They were offered a 1.3 billion euro subsidy to convert the factories into using hydrogen to produce steel. And ArcelorMittal said, even with that subsidy, it's too expensive. The energy costs are too expensive. And the spokesperson for the government said,
No.
the most important thing is that no money has yet been paid. What a relief! They
Yeah,
haven't
from his
taken the subsidy
standpoint,
yet.
yeah. Good grief.
I thought that was so funny. And then they were saying that even if you think about it, even with the subsidy, with the high energy prices, the costs are still too high to be profitable. But there's 3 other steel makers in Germany who've taken the subsidy and are still pushing through. But they're calling on the German government to improve market conditions for their product, which would basically mean, how do you improve your market condition? You stop anybody from buying other steel, because the big complaint is that they're importing steel instead. And what they found, like some of the steel they're getting is from Russia. I guess there's no sanctions on steel. Some of it's from Turkey and some of it's from China. If it's Chinese steel, they better be careful, because Vancouver used a bunch of Chinese steel to build a really big bridge that they've had nothing but trouble because the steel's of poor quality and the
Substandard,
welds are inferior, and it's buckling. So
Nice.
buyer beware. So that's it for my stories. And you can find me on Substack at thenemouthReport.substack.com. I'm not publishing anything for a few weeks just because I'm on holiday. Maybe I'll try to put something out about what we're seeing happening in the Middle East, but trying to just spend some time with family.
Outstanding.
Oh boy. So here are mine. So the Senate, we'll go with the second one first. The Senate has caved on Inflation Reduction Act, wind and solar subsidies. The House sent over a bill, the big beautiful bill, with a provision that would phase out, has a hard stop on those subsidies beginning in 2026, with projects that are completed before the end of 2028 able to benefit from the tax credits. The Senate has taken that strong language, which would have ended this outflow of hundreds of billions of dollars for useless energy projects very quickly. The Senate decides, well, we'll set a soft deadline for start of construction by the end of 2030, and we'll give you another 10 years to get linked into the grid with it, and you can keep accessing the tax breaks into perpetuity after that. So basically what the Senate language does is simply the same thing that we've had for the last 20 plus years on the stupid ethanol subsidies implemented during the Bush administration, that it's just a subsidy program that never ends. And we're going to waste billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars into perpetuity if the Senate version of this bill is passed. And guess who's leading that effort? Who chairs the relevant committee that is leading the effort to defang or to perpetuate these wind and solar subsidies? Texas's own John Cornyn. Okay. Senior citizen from my state. I'm hanging my head in shame as I say that. Okay. So there's that one.
He is despicable.
He
Did I
is,
say that?
and he needs
Sorry.
to go. He's going to have a strong primary challenge next year from our current Attorney General and Ken Paxton, and he's probably going to lose his seat. Thank goodness. Second one, Supreme Court wades into Louisiana's coastal erosion lawsuit. So we've had this lawfare, basically, campaign in Louisiana, in which, since 2013, in which the various parishes, they're not counties in Louisiana, they're parishes, local governments, suing the oil and gas industry to try to extract hundreds of billions of dollars out of the industry to as recompense for the coastal erosion issues in south part of the state, south of the Mississippi River. And the lawsuits basically want to hold the industry responsible for all of it. Well, the industry is responsible for some of it, maybe 10% of it. But the main culprit on coastal erosion, land loss in South Louisiana is the projects begun in the 1920s by the Louisiana state government and in the 1930s by the federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers, to build dikes and levees to stop the annual flooding and silting processes, in other words, impede Mother Nature of the Mississippi River, okay, which is what built that part of the state in the first place. Well, you take away the flooding and silting processes, what's going to happen? The land is going to disappear because it's not being replenished as nature has replenished it for millions of years. Okay. That's the problem in South Louisiana. So these lawsuits have progressed. I'm trying to remember, 31 of them now, all led by a single big law firm headquartered in Baton Rouge. And unfortunately, the Republican governor there, Jeff Landry, and his administration are supporting those lawsuits in direct contravention of the Trump energy policies. So the Supreme Court waded in, though, and said, okay, look, we're going to hear this case in federal court instead of leaving it in the state courts, where in April there was a negative decision in a lawsuit involving Chevron and Exxon, in which the judge who governed the case, had taken thousands of dollars in political contributions from the plaintiff law firm defending the plaintiffs. So it looks like these suits are going to have to go through federal court now, assuming the Supreme Court rules correctly. It's going to hear the case next year. And that's really good news for the Louisiana industry. So I just thought that was good news, actual good news on the energy front to highlight. And that's mine. That's very convoluted, I know. Energy Transition Absurdities is my Substack. It's blackman.substack.com. Come see me.
Oh, these are mine. Oh, horrible news. Global banks increase fossil fuel funding as climate pledges crumble. It's just the latest in a very long string of, pieces of evidence that not everything is going according to plan. And banks are, going back on their net zero plans. I'm sure we're all shocked. I can't quote from this story because I haven't read it recently, ever since I put that link out there. But I think the headline speaks for itself. The banks are, going back on their pledges. I wonder why, despite all this, ongoing conviction campaign, I'd like to call it that. Everything's fine with net zero. Everything's fine with the transition. We'll be borrowing more for the transition, especially in Europe. And what, did Trump change everything? I don't think so, because this is about last year. So they have seen the banks, the lenders, the financiers, the men with the money and women with the money. They've seen it's not working. I mean, how much more evidence do we need that this transition thing is not working? It's really exhausting, honestly.
Well, Irina, to add to that, there was the Bank of International Settlements, which is like the central bank for the central bankers, last week they produced their voluntary climate disclosure rules for the central banks. And I guess there was this massive fight because they wanted to make it mandatory. And the Americans said, no way, don't make this mandatory. So they've been working on these rules for a very long time. And so they issued them, but said they're just voluntary. So the minute that there's a favorable administration in Washington, they'll just make them mandatory. This is like how it always works. It starts voluntary and then it makes it mandatory. All we can hope is that reality continues to keep them awake and say, this is ridiculous. We should be able to keep investing in these things.
Yeah, because if they make it mandatory, then banks will suffer. Banks will lose money. Banks don't like to lose money. And
Exactly.
banks are the ones running the show. So you can't do it. They won't have it. The second story is schizophrenic. UK issues tougher environmental rules for new North Sea oil and gas drilling. I cringe every time I see a headline about the UK and energy, because it's painfully obvious that these people don't know what they're doing. First, they want to ban it, but they want to go ahead with certain kinds of exploration because, they grudgingly acknowledge that the country still needs oil and gas, and it's kind of better to source it locally instead of import it. But now they're doing tougher environmental rules. Which is it? Really? Do you want to kill it, or do you want to keep it on life support? And how do you expect the industry to work productively and meaningfully if you're keeping it on life support with tough environmental rules and banning new exploration but allowing exploration in adjacent deposits or something?
I know. Just like, because apparently some report came out saying, yeah, actually oil and gas is cheaper than the wind and solar that we have on the grid. It was like hidden in some big document, and it was making the rounds on X that, they'd made this admission. And then they're like, oh, we're gonna open up. Well, you're not gonna open up if you put these tougher environmental rules.
Yeah.
Who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it? Plus they
keep doing mutually exclusive things.
Exactly. And because they still have that massive windfall profits thing. So like a company's going to make that investment, have to do this environmental gauntlet, and you're going to be like taxed into oblivion. You'll make no profit.
Tax. Yeah.
Why bother? Yeah.
But thank you for sharing that story. Get my blood boiling.
Yeah, that was it for me. You can find me at Irina Slav on Energy, where I rant about energy. Mostly, I'm branching out into other topics because it's repetitive.
All right. What I actually had the same topic that we just covered on this one. Has net zero caught up to the UK's Don Quixote green energy dream, reconsidering North Sea oil amid energy crisis? And I'm like, holy cow, Batman. And so I basically went through that story and basically came down to the last way to go, Patrick. UK is just kicking the can down the road until they find some new energy schemes so they can tax its subject more. Outstanding point, Patrick. Way to go. And I also loved the Tom Mumford's comment that we just shared a second ago. But my bottom line on this one is, will the UK prioritize affordability and security or double down on its climate leadership? And as Energy Ed Miliband prepares to decide on Roseband and Jackjaw, the world will watch. I absolutely find this man needs to be a Wallace and Gromit character rather than a leader for the UK. He's absolutely a Muppet. Yeah. I'm not sure if he's a Muppet or Wallace and Gromit character yet. I haven't figured that out yet. But let's go ahead. We've already covered the regional conflict. We've already covered that. And Doug Sheridan gave a great LinkedIn article, and I absolutely love Doug. The Wall Street editorial board writes Trump's decision to strike Iran's 3 most significant nuclear sites helped rid the world of a grave nuclear threat and a large step toward restoring U.S. deterrence. It also creates an opportunity for a more peaceful Mideast. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities. He has a great point. His take, as the board points out, Trump made clear that for 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel, and this is absolutely right. Now, finally, an American president has taken the mullahs at their word before it was too late. His take number 2, no question that Iranian leadership should get what's coming to them. Good on Trump and America's military for delivering it. I'm actually very proud of President Trump for not going anything further, weaving through what the Iranians have said. If you use, like we talked about at the beginning of the show, if you use resources, we will attack those. And he says, okay. And he uses resources outside the area. But I am tired of wars. I do not want the United States in any war. And I think we do not have any business having the CIA doing a regime change. The CIA has been doing its own regime change in the United States for way too long. And I think that just needs to end. So you can find me on the Energy Newsbeat.substack.com, or you can also find me on energynewsbeat.co or energynewsbeat.com. And it's a lot of fun. I got a great team of people trying to keep me out of the pokey there.
Out of the pokey.
I don't think you're in any danger of going to the pokey, are you?
Oh no, but when you're under attack like I am, it means I'm on the right track. So I have a badge of honor for trying to be silent. So I guess that's a good thing.
I just want to say I agree with Stu's final comments there that, or I guess Doug Sheridan's comments that you were talking about, that it is a positive thing that if, as we're being told, Iran's ability to refine uranium has been ended for nuclear weapons. I mean, they have had that program for a long time. So that's a net positive. It's something to be happy about. But I'm just like you. I'm sick of wars in the Middle East. Don't want the U.S. involved in a long-term war in the Middle East. I'm glad if that mission was successful. I'm glad we did it. And the question now becomes what comes next in terms of if there is a regime change in Iran.
One thing I would like to close out and say is, as the light is shining upon us from Tammy Nemeth, and
Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's like a halo.
I couldn't figure out what that was for a second there.
Wow, I see the light.
No.
Looked like the second coming happening.
I believe in Dr. Nemeth. I truly believe that we need to understand how we got here. The United States caused this problem. Hillary Clinton got involved and got a lot of the uranium started processes with Iran under Bill Clinton. Yes, Hillary Clinton helped start it. Then you had billions of dollars funding this problem by Barack Hussein Obama started this problem. And then you had President, I'm not sure who I am, Biden, finish it by providing, I believe, is it $800 billion, whatever the number is, and billions of dollars, as Carl Sagan would say, that have been allowed into Iran so they could have their proxy wars. And I just find it despicable that the Democrats are now saying, oh, Trump is the dictator when they got us here.
Yeah.
Put up a solar panel.
Good advice, Tom.
Yeah, for for the whole 20 minutes of sun we're gonna have today. I don't know. I could be powering my iPad. Yeah, for sure.
But look at the bright side. At least Canada is not trying to block the sun while trying to promote solar panels.
No.
Yet.
Yeah. Not that we
Don't
know
give
of.
them ideas.
They
Because
do try to follow.
You know, the Canada and the UK seem to be attached at the hip because Carney and Starmer are good friends, and he's got all these connections with the British royal family and all this kind of stuff. And there's an institute in Victoria that is pushing this idea of geoengineering. They're having a special talk about it this week about putting particles in the sky, and they're really trying to normalize this. And there's this new institute in the University of Chicago, big surprise, that's was set up by David Keith, who came from Harvard, and he's really big into the whole geoengineering thing. So who knows? Could be doing it.
All funded by the Park and Gates Foundations.
Yeah. Yay.
Yeah. And Rockefeller. Let's not leave the Rockefellers.
Don't forget the Rockefellers,
Yeah,
for sure.
Don't forget, never forget the Rockefellers.
Well, there goes your YouTube channel. from
Yep, there I
Indiana.
go. All right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be
Hopefully I'll be
censored
back
now.
by next week.
All right. With that, like, subscribe, share. We will have this all out on our Substack channels. We appreciate every one of the comments. Tom, Patrick, Jeff. I mean,
Brian.
all of you guys. Robert, LinkedIn
Brian.
user, Mr. LinkedIn user. You might want to get your name changed. It's
Travis.
okay. You can go to the
Travis.
courthouse.
You just can't
It's
see it.
Travis.
Travis Lynn.
And,
All right.
Thanks,
See y'all next week.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.